Prepare your cable tie tape from stage 55 and the electrical system from the previous stage, okay, and one of your electrical connectors, and also from wire E from stage 66, cut one length 125mm long and another length 100mm long, and then with the cable tie tape make 3 10mm small strips ready for the next part of this stage. Now take the 125mm length of wire E that we've cut, and you'll notice on the back of your instrument panel there's a small groove just here. Okay, get some CA glue and then glue that down into position like so, and then allow that to thoroughly dry before we add the connector as shown on page 547 of your instructions, which will then connect the other 100mm piece of wire. Once you've done that, join the two cables together, as you can see here, noting obviously the shorter end of the connector goes onto the end of the 125mm cable and the long end fits into the 100mm end of the cable. Okay, once you've done that, get the electrical system that we assembled earlier, and then we're going to be fitting these two together as per your instructions with the 3 pieces of cable tie tape, one at 185mm from the end, another one at 165mm from the end, and then another one just by the connector. Okay, get a bit of masking tape to secure the two ends of the cable together as well, just before we do that. Okay. Now, as you can see, we've got that done. So once you're happy with that, just put that aside, and we'll move on to part 2 of stage 68, where we're going to be fitting the seat electrical system part A and the instrument panel to the monocoque. For this stage you're going to need the seat from stage 66, your monocoque assembly, and some wire C also from stage 66. Take the C wire and cut that to 200mm in length, as you can see here. And where you put the throttle cable bracket in your previous stage, okay, which is just here, you basically put some adhesive on the end, preferably a small amount of super glue, and just place that in the small hole, okay, and then allow that to dry for a few minutes. And then once you've done that, you need to cut a couple of pieces of the cable tie tape at 5mm, and then as per the instructions on page 547, sticking that down. And then what we'll do is we'll then run that along the inside of the monocoque, and when we put the seating, you'll notice there's a small notch just here, and this is where the cable sits in between. So before we stick the cable down on the inside of the monocoque, we need to place the seat and the cable in between that notch, so at least then we've got an idea of how the cable is going to run. Okay, so once again, continue to do that on page 547, following the instructions carefully, and sticking the throttle cable down inside the cockpit area. And once you've done that, remove the seat and take the electrical system that we assembled earlier, as you can see here, and just as you can see in the instructions on page 548, you've got two tiny little points on the underside of the electrical system, and they go on these two tiny little protrusions at the bottom where the seat sits, and these two wires go through a tiny small hole, as you can see in the second photograph on page 548 where the yellow arrow is pointing. So feed that through there and then fit your instrument panel to the monocoque, making sure that the cables are kept out of the way for the moment. Okay. Now once you've done that, carefully feed the cables, okay, from the electrical system, and as you can see here, just see where they're being threaded up and around up the back here, so that you're leaving these two cables on the side here, and then as per the last photograph on page 548, and that's just before step 3, we need to then use 4 pieces of the electrical tape to make sure that this cable stays flush against the side of the monocoque. So go ahead and do that, and then next we'll be fitting the electrical systems part B and the CD unit and the telemetry unit to the monocoque. Now once you've done that, just make sure that you've got the thinner of the two wires hanging over the edge for later on, and the thicker wire just tucked behind the radiator, just here. Okay. Now continue as per your instructions on page 549, where you're going to be adding the CDI units, okay, and the telemetry boxes, and following the cablings, using the cable ties as they're cable tied down using the cable tape, okay, and then glue those down in the position as you can see here. Okay, it's quite fiddly, so take your time, making sure that everything is seated properly, like I said, as you can see there. And then once you've done that, you then need to get hold of the electrical system B, and then once again taking the two top wires and crossing them over, as you can see here. Okay, so from that side, from the left over to the right, right over to the left, and then you've got your two holes here, and then just line up these two holes like so. Just test fitting that first, and once you're happy and these wires are out of the way, and then glue that into position. Once you've glued that into position, we can then look later on when we come to assemble the engine and the gearbox, and then we can start connecting these cables and these wires up to the engine. Okay, and that completes this stage.